Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, Cooking for the Family. I'm Dyvonne and today I'm going to share with y'all how to make this delicious orange butter cake. We are going to be making this cake from scratch. We're also going to be making some frosting for our cake, which is going to be an orange buttercream. If you have never had this buttery, delicious cake, I cannot wait to introduce it to you. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to get started with our cake batter base, and our base is going to be butter, and we're going to be using some unsalted butter, and I'm going to be using this right here is 2 sticks of butter that I actually have. We're going to use 1.5 sticks of butter, and 1.5 sticks of butter is the equivalent of 3/4 of a cup of butter. Okay, and so put it in my mixer, and I'm going to let this mix until the butter gets nice and soft. Now it is summertime, and so it's really warm, so the butter is not going to take long to kind of break down. And anytime I do baking, I always like to do it first thing in the morning because it's been 100 degrees temperature around here. But I could not let summertime go by without sharing this wonderful orange buttercream cake with y'all. So to the butter, we're going to be adding some regular granulated sugar, and that was 1 cup, and I'm also going to be putting in 1/4 of a cup. So that was 1 1/4 cup of regular granulated sugar. So I'm just going to let that mix in my bowl just like that. Now next what we're going to do is we're going to go on and zest our orange, and I'm using a regular navel orange. That's the type of orange that I'm using for the recipe. And so we're going to end up using 1 tablespoon of the zest. And so the zest, you probably are going to need, I have like a few oranges actually, so I see how much like 1 medium-sized orange is going to give me. And so, but we're going to need 1 tablespoon of orange zest. Now in the description box below, I will have a list of all the ingredients you need to make this wonderful orange buttercream cake from scratch. I'm sharing with you how to put it together, especially when you're baking from scratch. There's definitely steps that you want to follow when you are baking from scratch. So in my sifter, I'm going to put in 2.5 cups of cake flour. So we're going to be using 2.5 cups of cake flour total for our recipe. We're going to be sifting our cake flour twice, okay? Now cake flour versus all-purpose flour, cake flour will give you a finer texture and a more tender texture to your cake. You can use all-purpose flour if you'd like for the recipe. The only difference is that the all-purpose flour is not going to be as tender as you would if you were using cake flour, okay? So we're going to be using the 2.5 cups. Now what we're doing is we did a double sift. So I'm sifting it once and we're going to sift it again. Now also to our cake flour, as we're sifting it, we're going to be adding some baking powder, and that's our leveling, our baking powder, and we're also going to be adding some baking soda. And so our baking powder, we're going to be using 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and now we're also going to be using some baking soda, and we're going to be using 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Now if you are new to my channel, welcome in. If you're a returner, welcome back. I thank you all for your likes, your shares, your subscribes, your good vibe comments. I appreciate all of you. I truly do. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I invite you to hit that subscribe button and become one of my awesome subscribers. Now next, we're also going to be putting in some salt, and we're going to be putting in 1/2 teaspoon of regular table salt. Go ahead and sift all the ingredients together. Then I'm going to get a second bowl, and I'm going to take what I've already sifted, which was the cake flour, the baking powder, a baking soda, and salt, and we're going to sift those again into our second bowl. Now double sifting, especially when making a cake from scratch, is important because you want to make sure that you break up any lumps, especially if you're using cake flour like I'm using. Cake flour can tend to be lumpy, so definitely doing the sift and then the double sift makes a huge difference when it comes to baking your cake. Now next I have 4 large eggs, and my eggs are at room temperature. You always want to use room temperature eggs when you're doing especially cakes or anything that you're going to be baking, such as the batter like cakes or brownies and whatnot. You want to have those eggs at room temperature. It's going to blend better. Now I shook up my buttermilk. You want to make sure that you shake up your buttermilk before using it, and that's 1 cup of buttermilk that we're using. To the buttermilk, I added the 1 tablespoon of orange zest that we did earlier. Now with your eggs, add them to the butter and sugar one at a time, just like I'm doing here. And then after you add the 3rd egg, I go on and I scrape down the sides of my mixing bowl. I add the last egg, let that blend, and then we add that double sifted dry ingredients that we have. And just going to add this half of the dry ingredients. Then I'm going to add about half of the buttermilk that has that orange zest in there. Let your mixer go just like I'm doing here. Scrape down the sides just like this, because sometimes our ingredients can tend to gather at the sides or the bottom of our mixing bowl. Then I'm going to go on and add in that rest of that balance of our nice dry ingredients that we had sifted. Then after I do that, we're going to go on and add in the rest of the buttermilk. Now while I'm doing this and I'm preparing our cake batter, I have my oven is preheating on 350 degrees. So just to recap, y'all, we had our butter and our sugar together we had blended in. Then we added in our eggs at room temperature one at a time. Then we had our dry ingredients that we had all sifted together, and we also had the buttermilk. And now once it's done mixing, I don't over mix it. I'm just going to let this sit for a second while I go on and prepare our pans. To bake our cake, we're going to be using 2 8-inch round cake pans, and we're going to prepare our pans by using some parchment paper, some flour, and also some butter. And so this is because we want to make sure our cake is not going to stick. We are making this cake from scratch, and as you see, when you make something from scratch, especially you're baking a cake from scratch, it is a total labor of love. And so the last thing we want to do is have that cake stick at all. And so what I did was I went on and I measured out my round, and so I just used a pencil, went around the sides, and I'm using my kitchen shears, and I'm just cutting out some parchment paper. And like I said, the reason why I'm doing this is because this is going to ensure that the cake is not going to stick at all to the bottom. And so I've got my 2 sheets of parchment paper. I'm cutting out both rounds at the same time to make sure that I have the proper shape for my cake pans. Now this is going to go in the bottom of the cake pan, and it should fit nice and securely right in the bottom. Now before we put our parchment rounds in the bottom of our pan, we're going to use some butter, and I'm just going to use some regular unsalted butter, the same butter that we were using for our cake. I'm going to go on and just put some butter all around and just butter the pan. So I'm going to butter both pans. Now once you've buttered both of your pans, take your rounds that you cut out with the parchment paper and just press them and get out any creases if you can, or any bubbles that may be in the parchment paper. Just kind of smooth it out as best as you can. If it's not perfect, that's totally okay, but just want to smooth it out a little bit. Now once we have our rounds in there, go on and put a little bit more butter. It's about maybe a teaspoon of butter that we're going to put on top of the parchment paper as well. So you see that? So next, since we're using cake flour, we also want to use cake flour when we're going to be flouring our pans. So you put your cake flour in, and I just rotate it around in my pan just like that. My oven just dinged, so my oven is now preheated at that 350. It's ready to go. Our pans are just about prepared. So then you just tap off any excess of the flour, and that's whether you're using cake flour or either all-purpose flour. Go on and tap and make sure that you get rid of all the excess flour that you have in the pan. Then you want to even out your batter in both pans, just like I'm doing here. Just go on and even it out just like that. And I'm just using my butter knife to make sure that the batter is all the way around to the edge. Now our cakes are going to bake in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes, or either until we put an insert in and it comes out clean. So now we're going to prepare, while our cakes are baking, I'm going to prepare our buttercream, our orange buttercream. So for the orange buttercream, I also will have the list of ingredients in the description box below, but I put in 1 stick of salted butter. Then to that, I also added in some milk, and I used regular milk. You can use whole milk or 2%. I'm using 2% today. Now to that, we're also going to be adding in our powdered sugar, and we're going to be using 4 cups of powdered sugar total. So I usually start off with 2, let that start to kind of mix, and then we're going to add the balance of the other 2 cups of powdered sugar. Now this is an orange buttercream, and you know what? You can also make a lemon buttercream as well. The process to making a lemon buttercream is just like the one that I'm doing now for my orange buttercream for our cake. And be sure to periodically stop your mixer and scrape down the sides of your mixing bowl as well to make sure that everything gets blended well together. Now I'm going to add a little bit more of the fresh squeezed orange juice, and because we want to have your frosting at a spreadable consistency, okay? So I added about an additional tablespoon of the fresh squeezed orange juice that I had there. Now once we kind of look, it looks like this, where you can really spread it good on your cake because you want to make sure it's not too thick, it's not too thin. Then I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of some fresh grated orange rind that we had. So that's the zest right there. So I added in 2 teaspoons of orange zest. Go on and mix that around. And so now our frosting is ready. I'm just going to go on and set this to the side. I'm going to put it in the fridge. Our cakes have come out of the oven now. They have baked up nicely. We're going to let these cool because you want them to be totally cool before we frost them. So our cakes have been cooling in the pan. We're going to go on and remove them from the pan. And they came out, oh my goodness, y'all, you see that? They did not stick to the bottom. Having that parchment paper buttered with the flour makes a huge difference. So that way the cakes just pop out so nicely. Now my parchment paper is still in the bottom of my pan, of my cake pan. If you take your cakes out and your parchment, see how my parchment paper is still on the bottom? Now if you take your cakes out and your parchment paper is on the bottom of your cake, just go on and peel the parchment paper back off. You can just go on and discard the parchment paper if it happens to be on the bottom of your cake still. So I like to level off my cake a little bit. It was a little domed, so I leveled it off with my serrated knife, which was like a bread knife that I was actually using. And so now I'm going on putting on our buttercream. And so I'm just frosting the first layer. I did a nice job at frosting it. I think it looks pretty good, y'all. Go on and situate your second layer right on top, just like I'm doing there, and I kind of press down a little bit. Also with my my cake stand, my little cake stand that I'm using, underneath the first layer, I put a nice dollop of frosting to keep the cake centered in the center of my cake pedestal. And then I'm going on and I'm frosting the sides. Now frosting, what you want to do is make sure that you're always working within the frosting and doing nice even strokes going back and forth or either straight across, just like I'm doing, and just make sure that you're always working so that way your spatula has a nice amount of that frosting on there. So we're done frosting our cake, and I'm going to put a little finishing touches on our orange buttercream cake. I like to put some fresh slices of orange right on top of the cake. I'm going to just put a couple pieces actually of just like some sliced orange right on top. I put also some fresh mint. That mint came from my garden, y'all. So I put some fresh mint. I'm going to put our cake in the refrigerator for about 10 or 15 minutes just to let the icing kind of set up a little bit because it's already gotten hot this morning. So our cake has set for about 10 or 15 minutes. I put it in the refrigerator. And so just to kind of firm the icing up just a little bit. And now I'm going to go on and slice it, y'all, and see how we did. If you are still with me, I appreciate you coming this far because I know, like I said, baking from scratch is not easy. It is definitely a labor of love, but it is so worth it. And so showing you how to make this delicious cake from scratch has totally been my pleasure today. And this is our delicious cake, our orange buttercream cake with that wonderful orange buttercream frosting. So we're going to finish it off with a little bit of vanilla ice cream. Well, it is time for us to take a bite of our butter cake that we have that essence of the orange in there, using that wonderful orange zest, giving the cake a wonderful buttery orange taste. We've got that nice buttercream that we made all from scratch. Let's go on and put a little bit of vanilla ice cream with this. Go on and take your bite. That bite right there is well deserved for you. Let me go on and try it. Oh my goodness, y'all. This is so good. It is so buttery. The orange in there. Wow. Then that wonderful frosting that we made from scratch. See how that nice fine cake flour does with our cake when we do it from scratch like we just did. Well, I hope you give this recipe a try. I appreciate you all. I hope you enjoyed spending time with me this morning in my kitchen. I invite you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Click share and share this video with a friend or family. And remember, it's always good when Dyvonne is cooking for the family. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.